One of the things that I've been struggling with a lot is creative transitions for my kick and bass. Today I want to show you a few solutions that you can implement in your own tracks. In true projector fashion, I've over-engineered this to the fullest. As you can see, I've created a rack here which contains all of my filtering, as well as this processing rack here, which allows me to do all of the bass processing that I might need to do on my bass line. The cool thing about this setup is that it allows me to audition what my kick and bass is going to sound like when it's going to go in my mix. Because what usually would happen is that I would finish a production, I would export all of the stems and I would go into mixing, and then my kick and bass would end up sounding much different than what I originally intended after all of the processing was applied to it. So here I have an essential rack which allows me to do at least some of the processing that I might expect on my kick and bass, and then what I can do is I can export this as a reference and I can just turn off this rack if I need to, and export also a version of my kick and bass without any of the normal processing on it. It does have some other processing, as you can see here and all of this stuff, but the main part that I would usually do within the mixing is the stereo width, the EQ and some saturation. And as you can see, we have two effects for the stereo width. We have this dimension expander with high pass and low pass filters, and we have this spread. Then also I have some common frequencies that I would like to EQ, and these are just boosts and cuts. So this goes up 5 dB or down 5 dB. And then I have a low pass filter here. Finally, we have some saturation with different tone controls. Now I'm not going to go over this rack. As you can see, it's quite big. There's two internal racks in it. The first one is purely for the dimension expander. And then the second one is for the spread. We have some EQing here with a linear phase, and then finally the saturator. And of course, the point is never to go into these individual plugins here, but to just turn this off, close this up, and then go here and close these effects as well, so that you just control everything from the macros. Now, if you're enjoying this video up until this point, a like wouldn't hurt, and if you're new here and you want to see more of what I do, make sure that you're subscribed. You can also support the channel by checking out my products on Gumroad, as well as my masterclass, for which I have a link in the description. Now let's get back to the video. Now at this point I could say something like, okay, the link to this rack is going to be available on my Patreon or as a free download in the description, but I don't think that this is going to help you much. Because as you could have already seen, there's a lot of specific plugins and a lot of specific effects that apply to me only. You might not have the plugins, you might not have the effects, and you may not even like the exact setup that I have right now. So this video is not so much going to be a walkthrough of this specific rack, but more an overview for some of the effects that you can apply to your kick and bass, and some of the ways that you can implement those in your own racks that you can save and load up in any project. That also means that this tutorial isn't specific for Ableton Live. You can make racks in a whole bunch of different DAWs. So experiment a little bit with the racks, make a few of your own, and at the end of the day you'll end up with a nice processing rack that you can use in your future project. So let's go over some of the effects that I have in my rack. The first one is going to be a gain amount. This is just for gain staging, and this is really nice if you want to do gain staging for some of the other effects that you're applying. For example, we have this mid drive here and we have this erosion here, which are both going to be adding frequency content and therefore also a little bit of volume. If I want to compensate for that, I could use the gain right here. We then have high pass and low pass filters. These are pretty standard for any filtering transitions that you may want to do. I have my own special rack for that, and I'm using the linear phase EQ by the TR racks. The reason why I use this EQ, despite the last video that I did on iKey Multimedia, is because it has a very nice property that another EQ that I would like to use for this just does not have. The property has to do with a fault of Ableton, and a really annoying one at that, and that is that plugin delay isn't really compensated in the best form. Ableton is notorious for its plugin delay compensation being terrible, and I couldn't agree with that statement more. And one of the things that you need to do is you need to reset all of your plugins on opening a project. At least all of the plugins that introduce a latency. Now the plugin that I used to use for my filtering is this EQ here. This is the linear phase EQ by Melda. But in order to reset its latency, what I need to do is I need to open up the plugin, go into settings, and then turn off and on latency reporting. Now with the TR5 linear phase EQ, all you have to do is turn this button off and on again, and then it will reset the timing. So what I can essentially do is I can essentially map all of these buttons to one macro, which is what I've done right here. And this is going to reset all of my linear phase EQs. If I just turn it up completely, you will see that it turns it off, and anything but some of the highest values will turn them on again. Which means that for when I'm opening a project, what I can do is I can just flip this up, flip this down again, and then all of my timings are reset and I don't have to worry about it anymore. This is an Ableton only problem, so if you're following along with a different DAW, then this is not something that you have to worry about, but it is a neat feature nonetheless. So this is the filtering rack that is doing all of our filtering, and this is one of the many EQs that is actually being reset here. Some of the other ones actually exist within this processing rack, mainly the one for the high pass filter and the low pass filter on the dimension expander, as well as this main general EQ down here. We then go into the creative effects. What I've done is I've set up an overdrive with a frequency that I like and a tone that I like and the drive amount that I like. I also left the dynamics at 100% so that the dynamics aren't actually affected and we still maintain some of the high dynamics that we want in the kick and bass, especially when we're high passing that kick and bass. I then also added an erosion here. And this was the second effect that I added. This is the erosion here. You can see we have a frequency as well as an amount. So this is just the X and the Y on this plane here, which you can control. I also decided to add another stereo spread here. This is for generating more stereo width. You can see one of the parameters that we're modulating here is the stereo spread amount. We're also compensating with a little bit of gain. And then we have another utility, which is used to increase the spread even more. And this is also what is used for setting the gain right here. Now what I've done is I've taken this rack and without this bass processing part here, I've essentially placed it on the kick as well, and I've saved it as its own rack. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to open up all of the automations. You can see one of the ones that I don't have to open up is the reset. Again, this reset is just used when I open the project and want to reset the timings. But all of the other ones I'm just automating, and you can see that I've created a bunch of different lanes that I can then edit the different properties of. So listening to the kick and bass itself, this is what you get when you combine a few of these effects and play around with the automations for them. So you can see this is achieved by increasing the stereo width, changing the frequency of the erosion effect, increasing the amount of the erosion effect, increasing the amount of drive that we're having, as well as having a low pass and the high pass on top of it. For some reason, these two don't show up as the actual macro name, but these are the low pass and high pass frequencies. And the way that I've set it up in this rack is that by increasing this LP amount, you're actually decreasing the frequency of it. So the low pass filter actually becomes more pronounced the higher that you put it. And the high pass frequency is the same, but we're increasing the frequency when this is increasing so that it becomes more prominent if you increase it. And what I've done for now is I've just plainly copied over this to my bass channel. I like to keep my kick and bass separated. You can just place this on one of them and you have your effect for the both of them. I like to keep them separated because it allows me to make subtle changes, which I believe I did in a later or earlier part. Maybe here. I may have revised that already, but I think I had a different frequency on the erosion here. Yeah, no, it seems to be back in the same frequency. Let's double check here. So 5.7 and then 8.4. Yes, okay, so that's the same again. But I can show you difference here in terms of the gain. This is the gain. As you can see, again, it says macro 2, but that's just the gain parameter here. Whereas this gain parameter is doing all kinds of weird compensation things that I had to do to make sure that there's no strange clickiness and that it's exactly as loud as I wanted to. So those are my processing racks. Hopefully I could inspire you to make your own and spend a little bit less time applying all of the effects during all of your productions, as you just have to drag in that one rack and then you'll be able to use all of the effects that you might need on your kick and bass. Everybody is going to have their own preferences on what they like on the kick and bass in terms of effects. These are just some of the basis ones that you could implement. I just wanted to give you some inspiration to hopefully start making your own rack. If you enjoyed this video and you want to let me know, please do so by leaving a like. And if you're new here and you want to see more of what I do, make sure to subscribe. Another way to support the channel is to watch some more of my content, so I'll leave a few of my videos in the end cards. But that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.